I was late for a haircut when I saw the first arrow on the sidewalk. It was lime green, thick as a finger, and it pointed down my block like someone had drawn a runway for pigeons. Next to it, in the same chalk, was a word, start. I paused, keys in my hand, listening to the soft Saturday noise of my Portland street. Someone dragging a trash can, a dog collar jingling, a lawnmower starting and quitting like it changed its mind. The arrow felt like a dare. I looked at my watch, then at the chalk again, then at the barbershop text reminder on my phone. I could still make it if I hurried. But the arrow had that curious energy of a door cracked open. I walked toward it as if gravity had shifted by a few degrees and my block had turned into a gentle hill. The next arrow pointed across the intersection toward a maple tree where a kid's rope swing swayed like a metronome set on idle. The wind lifted the leaves just enough to flash their pale undersides. Under the tree, another chalk mark, left. My neighbor's cat, a round tuxedo with the face of a retired judge, watched me with slow, superior blinks. "Don't judge me," I told him, and turned left. I passed the duplex where the couple argues about composting on Tuesdays and shares pie on Sundays. I passed a little free library with a handwritten sign, "Please take two. My mom says I need shelf space," and a pile of National Geographics turned butter yellow by Oregon rain. Further down, the sidewalk narrowed, and then the chalk came back. "Step lightly. Nurse napping." An arrow pointed to a dark bedroom window. I walked on the grass, self-conscious and amused, like sneaking past a sleeping dragon that pays rent. I would have assumed it was a kid's game, except it wasn't messy. The letters were careful, nearly architectural, and the arrows had a confident shape, like whoever drew them had already walked this route 100 times in their head. The instructions were oddly practical too. Cross with care. Watch for bike. At a stop sign, the chalk said, "Wait. Breathe." So I did. It was the first time all week that I let all the air out of my lungs without holding some back for a future sentence. I came to a driveway sale I hadn't planned to visit. A woman in a mariner's cap sat behind a card table, chin in her hands, like a toll booth operator on a road where nobody travels. The chalk arrow veered right into her yard, and the word pause sat by a cardboard box of household orphans. A garlic press that could double as a medieval tool, a chipped mug that said, "World's Okayest Runner," and a Polaroid camera with a ribbon tied to the strap. Following the arrows, she asked, smiling with one side of her mouth. "You see them too?" I said, and felt a little silly for asking it aloud. "They've been popping up since last spring," she said. "Every few weeks, a new path. Friendly mischief. People come by, they browse, they say it led them here. I've sold 6 bunt pans because of those arrows." I picked up the mug. It was heavier than it looked, sturdy in a comforting way. I imagined the missing handle piece's flight path, a little arc of bad luck. "How much?" "Pay what it's worth to you," she said, sounding like she'd decided to outsource pricing to the universe. I gave her $3 and held the mug like a small award. She winked. "Keep going. It gets better." Past her porch, the chalk suggested a zigzag around a puddle that remembered last night's drizzle. I obeyed, and my sneakers stayed dry. I turned another corner, and a gentle slope took me toward the park. On the curb, someone had chalked a hopscotch grid, but it counted backward from 10. I hopped it anyway, sideways, losing balance at 3, and catching myself with a laugh that made a nearby crow tilt its head. At the park's edge, the chalk grew bolder, like a narrator's voice swelling. "Almost. You're doing great." I felt both ridiculous and buoyant, a grown man being cheered on by sidewalk chalk. The arrows guided me past the playground where a dad in socks and sandals pushed a toddler who shouted higher, with the power of a small dictator. The arrows skirted the basketball court and nudged me toward a wooden footbridge over the creek, where the water made the same sound as bacon beginning to sizzle. On the bridge, the chalk settled into a simple line with dashes, like a movie countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then, listen. I stopped and leaned on the rail. For a moment, there was just wind and water and, faintly, the squeak of swings. Then I heard it, a harmonica, soft and wobbly, from somewhere downstream. A tune I couldn't place at first, then recognized as "You Are My Sunshine," the way your brain recognizes a face from a kindergarten class photo. The sound floated up, imperfect and earnest. The chalk line ended at a final word, tucked into the corner plank, easy to miss. Welcome. I stood there long enough that the barber shop would undoubtedly give my haircut to someone else. The harmonica finished, and a voice, older, steady, called again. Another voice answered, again. They began from the top, mistakes and all. The wind pressed a cool hand on the back of my neck, and I realized the arrows had walked me out of my week and deposited me, safely, into my Saturday. I followed the chalk off the bridge and down a dirt path stamped with bike tires and dog prints. Somewhere ahead, the harmonica breathed in. The arrows pointed toward the music, and I let them. The chalk trail crossed the grass by the community garden, where tomatoes wore cages like cheerful armor and sunflowers turned their heavy heads as if listening in. A small sign stuck in one plot said, "Kale, please don't judge me." Another said, "Do not pick. I'm growing confidence." The arrows curved around the beds, careful not to trespass. I passed a man in a flannel shirt kneeling by a row of carrots and asked him if he'd seen the artist behind the chalk. He shook his head. "No idea," he said, brushing soil from his hands. "But they taught my son to look down. Now he spots snails, pennies, and reasons to slow down." He grinned at his own sentence the way you do when you stumble into something true. "You hear the music?" I nodded. "Harmonica. Follow that," he said, as if recommending a diner. "Best seasoning in the city." The dirt path widened, then narrowed, then dipped toward a cluster of picnic tables under cedar trees. On one table sat a thermos, a stack of mismatched paper cups, and a sign, "Coffee free. Tip with stories." I poured half a cup. It tasted a little like campfire, in a good way. A woman with silver hair braided like a rope over her shoulders sat at the end of the table, reading a paperback about a shipwreck. "You following the green?" she asked without looking up. "I think it's following me," I said. She chuckled, dog-eared her page, and reached into a tote bag. "People bring things," she said, placing a sandwich-sized notebook in front of me. The cover said Saturday Ledger in shaky block letters. Inside, pages were filled with short entries. Saw a blue bike with a basket of lemons. Gave away 3 zucchini, kept my pride. Hummed Jolene by accident, started a choir. I added my line. Traded $3 for an okay mug and some wonder. I closed the ledger and felt lighter, like I had paid a toll I didn't know I owed. The harmonica grew clearer, joined by a guitar that arrived late to each chord like a friend jogging to catch up. The arrows crossed the grass and hopped onto the path again. A chalk note said, "Low branch ahead." I ducked, and a maple limb combed the air above my head. 2 kids on scooters zoomed past me, their helmets glittering with dinosaur stickers, and one shouted, "You're almost there," as if we were in a marathon where the finish line was a feeling. Past the cedars, I reached a clearing by the creek. A man in a navy windbreaker sat on a bench with a harmonica case open like a dozen tiny beds. Next to him, a younger guy in a hoodie strummed a guitar with careful attention, counting under his breath. The older man played a phrase and nodded. The younger man copied it, then grinned when he got close. It wasn't a lesson so much as a conversation with fewer words. I hung back, not wanting to interrupt the quiet loop of their practice. The chalk arrow had ended a few yards before the bench, as if bowing out politely. I recognized the older man from around the neighborhood, the one who walks a dachshund in a sweater that looks like a retired sock. He saw me and lifted a hand. The universal hey. "Did the green trail drag you in?" he asked. "Guilty," I said, showing him my coffee. "It has good manners. Warn me about a low branch." Suggested breathing. He laughed. "It's a decent coach." The younger guy set his guitar across his knees. "We meet here Saturdays," he said. "No club, no dues. Just whoever shows up." He looked like he'd just discovered the courage to audition for his own life. "He's teaching me to bend notes without scaring small animals." "We'll get there," the older man said, like a promise. They played again, and this time the guitar leaned into the melody a little more, and the harmonica answered with a wobble that felt like a smile. A woman pushing a stroller stopped on the path and swayed, barely moving. A jogger took out one earbud and let their song elbow its way into his run. The creek pushed around a rock with the patient stubbornness of water that knows granite will lose. When the song ended, the older man pointed with his chin toward the trail. "You see the chalk?" I nodded. "It's not me," he said. "Everyone assumes. I just play. But whoever draws it knows the best parts of the neighborhood. The tiny bests." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small tin. "Altoid." I took one, cold and fierce on my tongue. "Whoever they are," I said, "they made my Saturday." "Mine too," the younger one said, like he'd decided to start admitting things. A breeze came through, smelling like cedar and barbecue, and somewhere a grill lid clanged open. The older man closed his case. "There's a porch set a few blocks up in an hour," he said. "Yellow house with a blue door. If you keep following the chalk, you'll find it." I thanked them and drifted back to the path. The green line returned, thinner now, as if it were conserving itself for the finale. It led me past a chalk square that said "skip if you like," so I skipped, because it would have been rude not to. A kid nearby cheered as if I'd landed a triple axel. I checked my phone out of habit and saw 3 missed calls from the barber shop. I thought of my shaggy head, and then of the arrows, and then of evenings when I'll be old and glad I chose music over symmetry. The chalk nudged me out of the park and into side streets where the houses wore their personalities like hats. A tiny craftsman with an entire porch dedicated to plants. A ranch house with lawn flamingos arranged as if they were whispering gossip. A duplex that smelled like laundry and garlic, the best kind of contradiction. On one sidewalk square, the chalk read, "You're invited. Slow down on purpose." I did, and the neighborhood rewarded me with details. Wind chimes tuned to an old hymn, an extension cord snaking to a driveway where someone was building something with a certainty I envied, a stack of board games on a stoop, free for the taking, including one with a missing die and a note. "Life is chaos. Use your phone." It wasn't more exciting than a haircut, but it felt like the same world with more light switched on. The porch with the blue door was impossible to miss. A yellow house sat at the corner like a cheerful school bus that decided to try domestic life. Paper lanterns draped from the rafters in lazy arcs, and a chalk sign leaned against the steps. "Porch concert, 5 p.m. Bring a chair or your knees." Neighbors arrived in a steady trickle, folding chairs under their arms, tote bags full of snacks, and the kind of optimism that comes in bowls. Potato salad, peach slices, something green with almonds. The chalk arrows converged on the porch like tributaries surrendering to a river. I found a spot on the curb across from the steps and set down my new mug, now holding ginger ale with a few ice cubes that clinked like polite applause. The breeze turned the lanterns into slow-motion jellyfish. A teenage girl wrapped twinkle lights around the porch railing, pausing every few bulbs to check the symmetry, then deciding to prefer an elegant wobble. A boy of about 8 taped a handwritten program to a post. Set list. 1. You are my sunshine. 2. Wagon wheel. 3. Surprise. 4. Neighborhood song. If brave. The if brave sat at a slant, as if bravery itself had written it with its left hand. Save me a patch, said a voice behind me. I turned to see the mariner's cap from the yard sale. She sat down next to me with a paper plate and a grace that comes from never rushing a Saturday. Sold the bunt pan? I asked. Traded it for banana bread, she said, lifting the foil. Interested? I nodded and took a piece that tasted like a recipe someone had memorized with love, not measurements. The older man from the creek climbed the steps and lifted the harmonica like a toast. The younger guy followed, guitar strap across his shoulder, a little pale but game. The teenage girl handed them a battery-powered amp that looked like a lunchbox. The porch felt suddenly like a stage and still, somehow, like a porch. People settled. The air shifted into that expectant quiet that makes even birds think twice. They started with, "You are my sunshine," and everyone over the age of 5 sang the chorus like they'd been saving it in their pocket. The harmonica bent the notes softly, and the guitar found its footing like a kid learning the balance point on a bike. When they finished, the crowd clapped in that sincere neighborhood way. No pity, all approval. They moved on to Wagon Wheel, which I always pretend to be allergic to, but my foot betrayed me and kept time. During this surprise, a woman I recognized from the community garden stepped up with a fiddle. She lifted the bow and played a tune that felt like it had a porch built into it. The child taping programs beat a plastic bucket with 2 wooden spoons, and for 1 minute and 30 seconds the whole block shared a rhythm. I don't know a better definition of luck. When they reached Neighborhood Song, If Brave, the older man looked out and said, "Anyone want the first verse?" Nobody moved. Then he pointed at me. I looked behind me to see if there was a braver version of me sitting there and found only the rest of my Saturday. The crowd murmured encouragement. The mariner's cap elbowed me gently. "You're up," she said, smiling like a conspirator. I surprised myself by standing. On the steps, up close, I could see the chalk dust on the porch floor, green smudges like grass stains. The older man leaned toward me. "Just tell the truth," he said. "The chords will follow." He strummed a simple pattern, and the teenager with the twinkle lights gave me a thumbs up that felt like a stamp of approval from the city. I took a breath, the kind the early arrow had told me to take, and sang, not with skill, exactly, but with the courage you borrow from a generous crowd. I sang about the morning arrow that said start, the nurse napping, the hopscotch counted backward, the harmonica by the creek, the ledger, the coffee that tasted like campfire, the kid who shouted, "You're almost there." I sang about choosing this over a haircut and how sometimes the right kind of lost is a way to be found. Somewhere around hopscotch, the guitar found me, and then the harmonica slipped in like an old friend who doesn't knock. When I finished, there was a second of quiet because a neighborhood needs a moment to agree on what just happened. Then the applause came, not thunderous but wholehearted, like someone clapping at the end of a small good movie. My face was hot and my legs were jittery, and I realized I'd been standing in the same place where, in winter, someone had left out a basket of hand warmers with a sign that said, "Take 2 if your dog is short." The boy with the spoons raised them like a referee. 10, he announced, for reasons known only to him. I bowed slightly, because the moment seemed to require some formality. As the porch shifted back to its own musicians, I sat again on the curb, ginger ale sweating onto the concrete. The mariner's cap nudged the mug with her toe. "Okayest runner, huh?" "Working toward moderately impressive walker," I said, and we both laughed. Across the street, The little free library's door swung open with a creak like a friendly hinge. Somewhere down the block, a grill lid clanged again, and the smell of corn joined the air. The music carried us through the next hour. A couple danced in a tiny circle near the mailbox. A teenager filmed on a phone, careful not to catch anyone who didn't want to be caught. When the sun slipped behind the firs, someone flipped a switch and the porch glowed. A new chalk note near the steps appeared, as if it had been waiting for the right light. Thanks for coming. Later, people folded their chairs like maps and headed home. I helped win the twinkle lights. The older man handed me a mint like a medal and said, "Good verse." The younger guy grinned that exhausted, proud grin that happens when you do a thing you promised yourself you'd do. The mariner's cap packed her plate. I stood there with my mug and my evening and felt like I'd pulled on a sweater I didn't know I owned. On my walk back, the chalk arrows glowed pale in the streetlights, the way moonlight makes quiet promises on the sidewalk. At the bridge, the word welcome lingered like the last line of a good letter. Somewhere a dog barked at nothing and meant it. I looked back toward the porch, now a soft rectangle of light, and thought of the invisible hand that had drawn the trail. I don't know who they are. I don't need to. On my block in Portland, someone decided to spend their chalk and their Saturday on an idea that a neighborhood can be gently steered toward itself. It doesn't fix anything large. It barely fixes small things. But it knits a little. It stitches a day to its own hem so it doesn't unravel. And that's something. At home, I set the mug in my sink and saw I'd tracked a fine crescent of green dust onto my kitchen floor. I didn't sweep it. I left it for morning, a small map reminding me where I'd been and where I could start again if I wanted.